All right, hello, I'm Jules Smith. I work for ApeWorks, and I'm going to be teaching you how to ape today. So what is Ape? Ape is a Python development framework, very much like Hardhat or Truffle, except in Python. If you've ever used Brownie, it's a lot like that, except we kind of take it next level, where we are very plugin oriented, and I'm going to go into what that means in a little bit. So why Python? So Python is really easy to read and write, as you probably know. It errors very loudly, and for those two reasons, it's more secure. It also integrates better with existing cybersecurity and data science tooling. So now that we have kind of a really nice framework in Python that we can easily integrate into these other spaces, and we can make use of these existing tools. And a lot of security tools already in the Ethereum space are written in Python, by the way. Okay, so Ethereum, there's a lot of abstractions, there's a lot of interfaces, like token interfaces, but even you can take it past that where, like signing a message, what do you use? Do you use your Ledger wallet? Do you use your MetaMask? In the end, all we care about is you have a signed message. Ecosystems in general are kind of abstract, so maybe you want to use the Ethereum chain, maybe you want to use an L2 or another chain. It doesn't really matter if they all kind of follow similar enough abstract interfaces. And that's kind of where Ape shines. We have a Python plugin ecosystem where you can pick and choose which parts that you want to use and install them for your project. And you can use the same framework no matter which chain you're on, no matter which accounts you want to use. If it's a simple NFT project or like a more complex DeFi project, you're gonna install different plugins based on your needs. And the best part about it is if those plugins don't exist yet, you can just make them. Okay, so stepping back a minute, projects in Ape look kind of familiar. Like you have contracts, you have tests, you have scripts, you have a configuration file. And now I'm going to show you a little project I'm working on. This is just a demo project, but it's going to show you kind of how to use Ape. So I have this repository here, and in it I have a demo project and I have a demo plugin. So they're in the same spot, and I'm going to link to the project on GitHub at the end. Okay, so the demo project, we have a contract in the contracts directory. This is called Downstream. Let me make my terminal smaller. This is called the Downstream Erc20. Just for demo purposes, it just requires you to have a separate token in order to have this token. So you can see there's this modifier has upstream, which takes the argument 2. This is Solidity. And it'll only let you mint that token if you have the other one. So that means we're going to need to probably have mainnet fork in our testing. So let's look at the configuration file here. So the ape config file, probably the first part you want to notice is this plugins list here. This will specify all the plugins that this project requires to run. So we're going to need Solidity for compiling the contracts. We're going to use Hardhat for its node, so we can run tests using the local Hardhat node chain. We're going to have to use the Alchemy plugin, and this is going to allow us to do mainnet fork, which we're going to need because it's a downstream token, so we need another token, and it's just easier to use an existing token. We also have this tokens plugin, which just really makes it really easy to use tokens in your scripts, and I'll show you how that works. And okay, so I will get more into this file, but first, a simple command to see what plugins you have, Ape Plugins List. Nothing should be installed yet, because this is fresh. But to install all the plugins I have listed here in my config file, so if you do ls, you see I have my config file there. So ape plugins install dot for the directory of where the config file is. You can also give it a list. So if you want the ENS plugin and the Infera plugin, you can do that. But if you just want to point to a project, you can just put the path to the project, and it should go through and install those plugins. And that will take a little while. So while that's happening, I'll just explain more in this config file. So we're saying dependencies to make it easy. You might have noticed in my contract, I'm just importing from OpenZeppelin. And that's what this declares here. This will make it This will allow me to download the OpenZeppelin dependencies from GitHub, and I can specify a version. And then when I'm configuring my Solidity plugin, I'm going to set import remappings to map to this dependency I've set. And I'm also going to set some default networks. So I want to use mainnet fork for all my testing, and I want to use Alchemy as my mainnet provider. And I'm also setting the upstream provider in Hardhat. OK, so it looks like my plugins got installed. So now, if they should show up in the list, but just to be sure. All right, so Ape plugins list. You can see I have some plugins installed. Another really nice thing about Ape is you have this console tool. So if I just do Ape console, this will launch me into an interactive blockchain environment, starting up the Hardhat node in the background. OK, so now if I do, you have some things automatically in your space, like network manager, networks.activeprovider.name. You see it's Hardhat. That's good. And quickly, I'm going to show you that tokens thing right quick. So from Ape tokens, import tokens. And let's say I want the DAI contract address. I can just do DAI. DAI. Let's see. DAI.address. So very easy to work with tokens in your scripts. OK, so I exit out of that. That'll shut down my Hardhat node, and we're good. So now I want to run some tests, but let's look at the tests. So our Ape Test tool integrates with PyTest. So it just, if you've used Python and PyTest before, this will be a little familiar. But basically, you have these Python fixtures. So we're going to define a few fixtures. We have an owner of the contract. We have some rando. And we have a WETH holder. And that's going to be our upstream token. And we're also going to deploy the contract for our downstream token. And you can see here, we're actually using the tokens plugin that I showed you on the console. All right, so into our tests, we have two very simple tests. We're going to make sure that upstream holders can have the downstream tokens. And then we're going to make sure that when we try to mint the token without having the downstream tokens, like some rando, that it's going to revert. And that's using this Ape reverts tool. OK? So to run your tests, all you do is Ape test. And I've already specified my preferred network in my config file, so it's going to use Hardhat. OK. It's also, I didn't compile, so it's going to download my dependency first, because that does not exist. And it only does this once, and it only compiles it once. And so we're going to watch that happen. Sorry about the Wi-Fi here, but we're wait for that. So it downloads the dependency. It stores that in like a data cache. And then in your project, when you specify the contracts, it'll pull those in and use them. And it won't have to compile them each time. OK, it's running the test now. I'll show you more on compile in a minute here, but it looks like my test passed. So I just compiled. So if I run ape compile without doing any changes at all, nothing happens because it does not need to do anything. But if I want to force a recompile, I can do -f, and it will just recompile my one contract. It does not need to recompile the dependency again because that's already there. OK, so we are good. Once you're satisfied with your project, it's well tested, you might want to create like a deploy script. So Ape supports that. You create a scripts directory, and then you create your scripts in there. And this will look a lot similar to what I was doing in those PyTest fixtures, where we have the upstream, and then we deploy the contract using an account, and we specify the address of the upstream. And this little helper here, get user selected account, this comes from our Ape CLI namespace, which is just full of odds and ends to help you have like reusable code for like getting accounts or selecting contracts or just anything that you will find useful when making scripts as well as plugins. So that's where that's coming from. And I'm just going to run this. Ape run deploy. starts up my node. It's going to prompt me for my account. That's this line here. And I'm going to pick, then you just put the number. You can also type it out. It works either way. Thank you. Sorry. All right. Yes. Okay, so that's a deploy script. All right, so what just happened? So in Ape, there's all these commands, as you saw. We have ape compile, ape accounts, and this is sort of like our CLI entry point into the framework. And then inside of Ape core, we have all these abstract classes. So we have a compiler API. This is an abstract class. This is an abstract class. And basically, how this works is we define these abstract classes, and then plugins, which are other Python packages that use Ape, they implement these abstract classes, and then Ape knows about them, and then Ape will use the plugins based on certain criteria. So if like you're compiling a Viper file and you don't have Viper, it can't compile it. But if it notices you do have the Viper plugin installed, now it's able to recognize that these are source code files for your contracts, and now you can compile your Viper files. And the same thing with accounts. You can manage accounts, through hardware wallets. We have a Ledger plugin. We have a Tracer plugin. We even have like local accounts natively in Ape. But then you can basically you can make a account plugin using any sort of like private key storage if you really wanted to. Like Ape Keyring is exactly that. Okay, I didn't want to show that yet, but now I'm going to show you a little bit about implementing an abstract class. So I have this plugin project in the same directory, and there's a few files in there. The main thing we want to look at first is we can import from the Ape API namespace these abstract classes. And there's one called Provider API, but there's also this half-implemented one called Web3 Provider, and this will get you pretty far, and you don't have to use this at all. All it needs to do is implement the Provider API, but if you want like a little bit, if you want to use the Web3.py framework, then you can just use this one, and it'll kind of save you a little bit of time, because it is kind of reusable. And there's different methods that must be implemented, or else you will get some warnings. Ape will get mad. So this is a connect method. This is required, but I'm just going to temporarily destroy it. First, I'm going to actually install. So these are just Python packages, plugins. It has a setup.py file. So you can install it using pip. Plugin. Okay, so now we have a local plugin installed. If I do a plugins list, I'm going to show up. And if I type ape, let's see what happens. I get a warning. Chain stack from ape chain stack is not fully implemented. Remaining abstract methods connect. Okay, so it did not like that we didn't have the signature correctly here, so I'm going to fix that. Save. Run ape again. All right. Wait, did that work? Yes. Okay, so we're all good. We now have, if I run Ape Networks List, this is another command, just for reading what providers you have available. You can see here that we have chain stack. This, by the way, I'm making a chain stack provider as part of this demo. So we have chain stack, which I just installed here locally, and that's part of, we have Ropstein, mainnet, and looks like Rinkeby. So different providers support, different networks, so you don't always get everything. So now let's try to use chain stack. I'm going to launch that same console, and I'm going to use Rinkeby this time. I'm going to use Alchemy because that's installed. So you can always change the network. You don't have to use the ones in the config. You can use the network option and specify. So the first part here would be Ethereum. It's kind of assumed if you don't put it. So Ethereum, Rinkeby, Alchemy. So ecosystem, network, provider name is the pattern there. So now let's see what's going on. We have networks, active provider, name looks like it's Alchemy. I forgot I was going to use chain stack. I'm so sorry. Okay, let's use chain stack this time. our new plugin that we just made. And chain stack. Okay. So one other piece that's missing here is this init.py file. This is where you will register your plugin. So every plugin needs to import from Ape, import plugins, and then you import whatever classes are part of your plugin spec. And then we have some Ape networks here, hard-coded, that chain stack supports. And then we loop through the networks, and then we yield this provider, and that allows it to show up in that networks list and allows it to be used by specifying it this way. Okay, so chain stack's registered. We're in an interactive environment. Let's just maybe get a block. All right, so it seems to at least work a little bit, and this would be a good start if you wanted to build the chain stack plugin. It's already kind of working right here. All right, you can exit out of that. And when you call exit, that'll call this disconnect method, and all that does is set this variable to none, really. And that's basically it. So we have a couple bounties. We have a bounty for best project using Ape, and we have a bounty for best plugin using Ape. So if you want to integrate with something, or you want to try to use Python Ape in your projects, then come talk to me, and I'll help you get set up. Or we have we have lots of documentation. We have Banana Jam bounty information, and then also the two projects I just showed you are also available. And I guess that's all I really had. You want to look at the... Okay. Links again. Here, I'll make it big. Our table is just on the 3rd floor. I don't remember the number, but we have a lot of bananas. It's the table with all the bananas. Come find us. M36. All right, thank you.
We actually have about 5 minutes if you want to take any questions from the audience.
Yeah.
Hi, is it possible to run a test without having to recompile the whole project again like Brownie does?
Yes, so it only compiles your contracts when it notices there's a change in it. So if there's no change in the contracts, it won't recompile. It just makes sure it's up to date before it runs the tests.
Any other questions? If not, then please give a warm round of applause to Jules.